Pablo, I heard you were an Islamophobe. What's going on with that?
Because I was a Christian at that time, I was thinking, why am I hating on Muslims, these people that want to reach the same goal as me, and that is paradise?
And some people, when they see history, they're like, oh my God, history is boring.
Because the way they teach it doesn't excite people, it doesn't bring enthusiasm. It's not just, about looking at the past and being nostalgic and like amazing.
We was kings.
Yeah, we was kings and that kind of stuff. Yeah. No, it's about getting these lessons and implementing it into your life.
There was Ertugrul, there's Sultan, Osman, now there's Sultan Mehmed. For the first time, you're seeing in media representation of Muslims doing something.
As a historian, I don't like these shows.
Oh, you're breaking my heart, man. You're breaking my heart.
And do you know which community accepted the Ottomans as liberators? The Jewish community in Bursa. The Christians and Muslims are living together in coexistence and peace.
I'm sure most of our guests haven't heard of these things. History means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. For some, it's boring facts and figures that you have to memorize in high school right before you cram for an exam. For others, it's their family story, their identity, where the parents came from. For some people, it might even be watching Ertugrul during COVID lockdown with your family. The idea that history is something so abstract, yet so unique, yet so beautiful, yet so contested is something that we're here to talk about today. For many Muslims, it's a sense of the idea of glory, that we once were also great, that once we also did something beyond the current state that our ummah is in today. Today, we have a fascinating historian who has changed the way thousands of people look at history. He believes that understanding our past directly shapes how we understand coexistence in society and how we build the fabric of society itself. Pablo, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to the Thinking Youth Podcast.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair for having me. I look forward to getting into this.
I'm super excited to have this conversation, and we're going to get into the coexistence, we're going to get into the Ottomans, we're going to get into some things that I know people are dying to hear. But before we do that, Pablo, I heard you were an Islamophobe. What's going on with that?
All right, so before I became Muslim, before, I reverted to the deen, I was, I had Islamophobic tendencies. So, I grew up in the UK, as you can tell by my accent. And the time I grew up in, there was a lot of, things that were being said in the media about Islam and, how it was being represented. So I took these kind of beliefs as well. And, I held them for a long time. And, I looked upon Muslims, whether they're men or women, through a unfavorable lens, right? But alhamdulillah, that went away when I became older. And the reason why that went away is not because of any type of book or any type of video, but, you mature and you realize that, because I was a Christian at that time, I was thinking, why am I hating on Muslims? Why am I hating on these people that want to, reach the same goal as me, and that is paradise? But we have a different interpretation of what paradise is and how to acquire that end goal. But, we still have, that commonality and not that difference.
No, definitely, subhanAllah. And no, alhamdulillah, rabbil alameen. I think that goes to show, that leads right into our conversation of coexistence, understanding people, is that minds can be changed, ideas can be changed. And human beings, we're through this journey. Me and you, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide all of us. And it's really fascinating. And it's an honor to have this conversation today. And I'm really grateful. So to get right into it, a lot of people, when they hear history, as we talked about at the beginning, like it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of people. And some people, when they see history, they're like, oh my God, history is boring. Or they have all these different ideas. I want to ask you, Pablo, the historian, why should everyday Muslims dive deep into their past? And how does knowing our history shape what we do today?
Okay, so I want to first touch on the thing you said, that history is boring. And the thing is, the way teachers are teaching it at school nowadays, it is boring. They just talk about these random events that you don't get any tangible lessons from. Like, for example, when I was learning about Henry VIII, yes, he's very infamous for what he done. But, apart from that instance with his romantic partners, he lived a very boring life. Because the way they teach it, doesn't excite people. It doesn't bring enthusiasm. And And that's a lot to do with the way the teachers propagate history. You know, I liked history because I done my own research. And many people that talk to me that say, I'm so fascinated by history, I love your videos. But whenever they teach at school, or when I done it at A-levels or at GCSEs, I didn't like history because, you know, it was so boring. But now, you know, not just the way you do it, but when I read about it, when I watch other people doing lectures, you know, I get fascinated.
It's fascinating.
Because it's the way you communicate the message, right? And so, but history is very important, right? Because it's not just, you know, about looking at the past and being nostalgic and like, oh, we were so amazing.
We was kings.
Yeah, we was kings and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
No, it's about getting these lessons and implementing it into your life. For example, you look at some of the great luminaries of Islamic history, like Al-Biruni, who was he literally discovered gravity before Newton. And regarding that is that it's not just, oh, he was Muslim, alhamdulillah, he done that. No, you have to, you know, take inspiration from that. It gives you, you know, that sense of urgency. All right, you know, a Muslim discovered gravity. He made such a monumental breakthrough within his field. I can do that as well. So it gives you motivation for that, you know, physicist. Or if you look into the many Muslim medics of the past, or the many Muslim mathematicians like Al-Khwarizmi, you know, if Muslims, you know, take them as inspiration, you know, the situation and the situation of the Ummah and the Muslims today would improve drastically by taking these people as inspiration. Not just saying, oh, whoop-de-doo, we had that in the past, but actually, you know, being inspired by that. And it also gives you a blueprint on how to, you know, run a society. For example, I'm specializing in Al-Andalus. My dissertation will be on that. And it's literally on coexistence in Al-Andalus. And regarding Al-Andalus, it gives you a whole blueprint, whether that is the Taifa period where there was different states fighting against each other, very small states. So 30 petty kingdoms within, you know, between Spain and Portugal. 30 is a lot. Yeah. And Spain and Portugal are very small nations, right? So it gives you that, like, you can't be disunited over, you know, petty reasons. But it also gives you, you know, the understanding that Jews, Muslims and Christians coexisted, and they were, you know, copying of each other and bringing about a lot of advancement. And it also gives you an understanding that, you know, the Muslims experienced so much risk, so much wealth throughout the whole of Al-Andalus. You know, I don't think any other country or state in history has really experienced the wealth that Andalus did. Not in the sense that they were the richest, but the consistency of the wealth was there from the start to the end.
You know, there's this quote. It says that the ones who do not know about their future cannot even begin to dream about... the ones who do not know about their past cannot even begin to dream about their future. Now, I'll be honest with you. I saw this in an episode of Ertugrul. And I wanted to talk about that a bit, because there is the crowd of people that, as we addressed, that history is boring and whatnot. Then there's the other crowd that love history. And you know, on YouTube, they're spamming and they're going through Kings and Generals videos, and, you know, you're watching, and then you go to Netflix, and if you're in COVID or the time or after, there was Ertugrul, there was Alparslan, there was Osman, there was now this Fatih Sultan Mehmet, and these stories of glorious, for the first time, you're seeing in media representation of Muslims doing something, being portrayed as good. Their Islamic values are there, and a lot of people just love the idea that Muslims are united. Ertugrul makes your heart feel good. So I wanted to ask you, why does that resonate with so many people? Okay. And the Ottoman period and the Ertugrul phenomenon.
All right, firstly, as a historian, I don't like these shows. I'll tell you why.
No, you're breaking my heart, man. You're breaking my heart.
The reason I don't like these shows is because, as someone that looks into the sources, looks into the books, these shows are mixed with falsehood and also truth. So it's a mix of, you know, both, right? So, you know, sometimes they'll say things that are historically accurate, but other times they'll just make these myths up and these legends. For example, very controversial, but Osman's dream probably never happened. Most likely, yeah.
You're telling me the tree in the chest?
I'll tell you why. Because the first ever time Osman's dream was mentioned was during Bayezid II's time. Osman the first was ruler from 1299 up until 1324. Bayezid II, when did he come to power? 1481. So if you do the maths, that's about 160 years at the very minimum. But of course, it was later on during his reign because Bayezid II tried to, what's it called? He tried to legitimize and create a noble lineage. So he said that the Ottomans are descendants of the Seljuks. The Ottomans, had this dream. Osman had this dream, so they tried to create all of this mythology. And it's not me to, rain on someone's parade, right? But in reality, we, as a Muslim historian, you have to be truthful in what you say. But going back to the other part of the question, and that is, these shows, like the Ottomans, you're talking about how they resonate with people. One of the reasons is that these shows make proliferate how these kings, these sultans acted. For example, you could read Mehmed II in a book, but it won't be the same as watching it on a show, right? So it makes people more excited, like, yo, he done this and done that. Or they say, oh, Osman done this, or Ertugrul done that. And so, or Suleiman the Magnificent done this. And it also, I feel like it also resonates with people because, these were legendary figures and they're like, oh, these people were Muslim and they done so much greatness for the ummah. So it gives you, it goes back to the first question, some type of motivation, some type of inspiration, so there, you can say that there's some good with these shows. Like, for example, someone sent me an article. He sent me this article that people converted to Islam because of these shows.
I saw that.
So there is some good to it.
I think one of the actors in Ertugrul actually was one of the people that went and flew over and people did shahada at his meet and greets or something. Yeah.
So there is goodness with these kind of shows, but me personally and other historians, we don't really like it because when we watch it, we see, oh, this is mythology. Oh, no, this is true, but then this is mythology. So, yeah.
So, we've had this romanticized view of the Ottomans, and you ask anyone in the Arab world, in the Middle East, or in Pakistan especially, or and obviously here in the West as well, there's this romanticization of the Ottoman Empire. On the other hand, in much of academia, and maybe Western academia, there is this other image of the Ottomans being evil and cruel and just barbaric. And I can attest to, I can never forget it. I think I was in my third year of my undergrad, and it was a course, it had something to do with late history, Islamic history. And the chapter and talk about the Ottoman Empire started and ended with oppression, tyranny, injustice. So could you just speak to that? Because we're talking about coexistence, but then I'm being told about Red Sultan and all this horror. So clarify that for us.
So the understanding and the idea or the narrative, let's say, of the Ottoman Empire being barbaric, oppressors, and, any other synonym you can think of, comes from the late 19th and early 20th century. So there was quite a few things that happened on both sides. The thing is, the Western academia side of things will only highlight what happened, what the Ottomans done, what the Ottoman Turks done. Yes, what they done was, very bad, right? But it was also on the other side as well. For example, you have the Circassian genocide, which about, the numbers there's many different numbers, but at the very minimum, about 1 million people persecuted, died, and 1 million fled to Ottoman lands. Then you have a lot of, persecution in the Balkans. About 5 to 10 million died, Muslims in the Balkans, and these are not Turks. These are not Turks from Central Asia. These are actually people that look like me, Balkan white. Serbian Muslims, Bosniak Muslims, Greek Muslims, Bulgarian Muslims. That whole area, because before it was more diverse in the sense that Greece had a sizable percentage of Muslims. Bulgaria did. Of course, regions, Bosnia. All those regions had sizable. But at the same time, Anatolia was more diverse there was more Christians there and more Greeks and whatnot. But regarding the perception of the Ottomans, it comes from the late 19th and early 20th century, where because the Ottomans were contracting, because of the rise of nationalism and other different factors, this all culminated in, persecution by both sides, and this is the matter of fact. We can't hide away from it. But that doesn't negate the fact that from the early 14th century up until the late 19th century, the Ottoman Empire fostered coexistence between the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim communities. So I want to go back to the start. Please. So when the Ottomans rose, they were just taking villages and petty lands, right? Up until before Osman died, they started the siege of Bursa. So they started in 1317, and Bursa is a city in Anatolia. Yeah. And after 9 years, it fell to the Ottomans. And do you know which community accepted the Ottomans as liberators?
Which?
The Jewish community in
Really?
Bursa. They also helped the siege. And the reason for this was that the Byzantines, yes, they were declining, but they persecuted the community, the Jewish community, throughout their empire. And plus there's theological kind of reasons for that, in the sense that, and this is what many historians say, that because, you know, they you know, saw the Jewish community as the people that killed Christ, right? Jesus, so they called them Christ killers, deicide. This is the interpretation that the historians have stated in many books. So, and the same thing happened when they took Edirne, which is in Europe, when they took Ankara, when they took all these different cities, the Jewish community saw them as liberators, right?
So the Jewish community, just to get it clear, the Jewish community sided with the
Ottomans.
Muslim Ottomans in their conquest,
in every siege,
in liberation.
in
Really?
every siege, yeah.
Wow.
And there was a traveler as well who traveled through Anatolia, and this was an archbishop, the Archbishop of Thessaloniki, which is a city in Greece, and back then it was Greek speaking. Today it's still Greek speaking, but and it was part of the Byzantines. He walked through, and he was a prisoner, so it makes his account more valuable. What he said is that the Christians and Muslims are living together in coexistence and peace. And this is not my words. This is been stated and relayed by a historian called Caroline Finkel in her book Osman's Dream. And I'll give you more, because I feel like this
Please do.
question is pertinent.
Yes.
And this is my kind of, not speciality, but it's my, you know, thing I try to focus on.
I've never heard, most people, I'm sure most of our guests haven't heard of these things.
So we have also, when the Ottomans conquered Constantinople, it wasn't the way for Bursa or Edirne or any of these cities, but with Constantinople, now it's known as Istanbul, when Mehmed Fatih conquered it, he basically birthed the Malay system. And the Malay system was this, it's called like the Malay in the Turkish language means nation, right?
Yes.
And this basically gave everyone autonomy. So the Jewish community in Constantinople had their own chief rabbi. The Greek community, the Armenian community, got their own patriarchates, right? And as a result of this, they could determine what was said in their own schools, their own laws. You know, the whole it was basically self-autonomy, right? But everyone pledged allegiance to the Sultan. This was how it was before the rise of nationalism. That's why the Ottomans, you know, they lasted for so long, because people, okay, we have autonomy. We just pledge allegiance to the Sultan. We give him his taxes, and that's it. That's how people saw it up until the rise of nationalism. Let me give you another example. When the Ottomans conquered Cyprus in 1571, and the commanders that conquered it was, you know, regular commanders. The Sultan stopped engaging in battle. After Suleiman the Magnificent passed away, they were just sedentary sultans. So when the Ottomans conquered Cyprus from the Venetians in 1571, they were seen as liberators, again, by the Christian population. The reason for this is what? Because the Venetians persecuted the Byzantine Orthodox Christians there, the Greek Orthodox Christians, because Venetians from Italy are Catholic, right? So they had theological differences. So that's why, and also another thing is that they were forced into slavery. I can't remember exactly the amount of times per week or per year, because it's the same thing with Crete, right? The subjects were under the Venetians and they were Greek Orthodox. And in Crete, they were also subject to a certain amount of days of free labor, of slavery. So that's why when the Ottomans came to Crete as well, they were seen as liberators. And that's why Crete had one of the largest populations of Muslims in Europe at the time. By the 19th century, mid 19th century, about 50% of Crete was Muslim. And this is because going back to when they were seen as liberators, people just took on Islam as the religion. But what's interesting is that the Arabs actually conquered Crete in 827. Yeah, so it's very interesting, but they lost it in 961, if I'm not mistaken, to the Byzantines, and then it changed hands a few times and then came back to the Ottoman Muslims.
This is very fascinating. The fact that I feel like, again, you don't see these narratives in these mainstream discourses or political discourses or historical discourses. So it's fascinating. And I've heard on a few podcasts, and I wanted to get your thoughts. People always make the claim and they say that history shows that many Christians in Europe and elsewhere preferred Ottoman rule over their own Christian kings. Why was this the case? And what does it teach us about justice and minority rights in that era?
Okay, so going back to the previous point, they preferred it because, they weren't forced into slavery. When the Muslims came to Crete and Cyprus, no more slavery, all they had to do is pay the jizya. And, there's controversy around the jizya.
You could say, what is jizya? It's a term thrown out on Twitter a lot these days.
So jizya is, if you look into the English translation, it would be poll tax or head tax. And this is basically a tax where you pay for your, you could say protection, but it doesn't really translate, right? Basically, the Muslims, they pay zakat, and the Christians, the Jewish community, or in India, or the whole subcontinent, the Hindus would pay the jizya, or in Persia, it would be the Zoroastrians. So it was non-Muslims would pay this. And it was basically for freedom, and protection. So you would pay it, and you would have your own courts. You would have your own schools. You would have your own you would have self-autonomy.
Autonomy, like you earlier mentioned, yeah.
And, there is no fixed amounts. However, Omar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, he gave a very important advice, near to the end of his life. And he said, be merciful to the dhimma regarding the jizya. So, however, some empires have taken advantage of the lack of, requirements, in the sense that, they paid high, some paid low. But, for example, when the Muslims conquered Persia, Hugh Kennedy, who's another historian, he says that the jizya was very affordable. So what does this mean? It means that, the Muslims didn't just charge jizya just so they could, extract and extrapolate money. So it shows you that this kind of understanding of the jizya is very warped in Orientalist kind of ideas. And
all the time, Muslims also paid tax.
Paid zakat, which is 2.5%, and is men and women had to pay it. But jizya is only men, able-bodied men with provision. For example, Aurangzeb, which we will go into in due course, inshallah, but I just wanted to say one thing here, because we're on the topic of jizya. Aurangzeb imposed jizya, and this is very controversial within, South Asia. He has a very controversial legacy there. And Aurangzeb imposed it. However, only able-bodied men had to pay. If you're ill, unemployed, insane, disabled, a woman, Brahmin, so the creme de la creme Hindu group
caste
in the caste, you didn't have to pay it. So it was a very small minority that had to pay it. And there was times, and even though people use this, I don't know if it's a very good argument, but I'll just say it, and the viewers can think for themselves. But some, rulers, they try to prevent people from converting to Islam through the jizya, right? So even if you converted to Islam, you'd have to pay the jizya. So it's a thing where,
Some Umayyad times, I believe, right?
Yeah, Umayyad times. So it's like a thing where, the jizya wasn't there to subjugate and force people to Islam. In reality, as you said, Umayyads, some Umayyads, because other Umayyad caliphs were amazing. For example, Omar ibn Abdul Aziz, rahimahullah, and Muawiyah, radiallahu anhu, and others. So it truly shows you that you need to read. And at the end of the day, you know, this is my kind of goal, is to change that kind of perception, change that narrative, if you'd like, about Islamic history and how people perceive it. But in reality, you always have people that will get onto you, but it just gives you more motivation to keep on going, because you know you're doing something right, inshallah.
Inshallah. Let's talk about Aurangzeb.
Yeah.
And for those of you who might not be familiar with Aurangzeb, you know, a few years ago on TikTok, I was scrolling and I see this video of, I believe, a sheikh somewhere in the Khalij, and, you know, there's some music playing in the background, and it's building up. And goes,
I don't think it was the music.
It was or a nasheed, like some sounds in the background where it's like Malik al-Hind, Sultan al-Azim, Sultan Aurangzeb Alamgir.
Yeah.
And he's describing Aurangzeb as this phenomenon of a ruler, a powerful conqueror, a liberator, in this very positive light. And that it's like, immediately I'm like, who is this guy? Malik al-Hind, king of what is, well, today India. Mm-hmm. And I go and I Google, and as a Pakistani, you know, we have a very good image very highly praised image of Aurangzeb. But then when you go to Google and you Google Aurangzeb, you see recently there's a lot of movies and films and stuff that say completely otherwise. Mm-hmm. I mean, Bollywood has made movie after movie about Aurangzeb, talking him as if some old weird man and oppressive and it's just horrible things, and they, I don't know, they start dancing out of nowhere like all the time, so I can't really tell. But please tell us about who was perhaps one of the most misunderstood rulers in history, Sultan Aurangzeb of the Mughals.
Okay, so Aurangzeb Alamgir was the 6th and final great Mughal emperor. So he was the 6th and the last of the great Mughal emperors. And he has a controversial legacy. He has a controversial legacy because of British colonial records. So when the British colonized South Asia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, they perpetuated this narrative that Aurangzeb, you know, was killing millions of Hindus. He destroyed thousands of temples. He killed his brothers. He persecuted his sons. All of these kind of things. But if you peel back the layers, there is a kind of if you take it out of context, yes, it seems crazy what he done. But if you actually, as I said, if you peel back the layers, it's not what he done is not what has been propagated. Mm-hmm. So firstly, to debunk the most biggest myth is that he killed millions of Hindus. There's no record of this. They take the understanding of this through the battles he done, right? And this is not like whether it was Muslim on the opposition side or Hindus. You know, when there's war, right? When there's a campaign, there's a campaign. It wasn't a thing where he was like, you know what, I'm bloodthirsty, I just want to target a certain religious group. This wasn't the case. And you might be thinking, why did he go on campaigns? Because he wanted to expand the Mughal Empire as much as he could. He was a military man at the end of the day. And so he brought the Mughal Empire to its greatest extent. About 25% of the world's wealth was under his control, and 95% of the subcontinent was also under his control. So he possessed 25% of the world's wealth and 95% of the subcontinent, also including Afghanistan as well. So he was a military man. Regarding his brother, so he did eliminate his brother. But you have to think about the situation that they were in, right? So when Shah Jahan, which is his father, he didn't appear on the balcony. And when I say appear on the balcony, these Mughal emperors had this tradition where they would appear on the balcony to show that they were well, that they were in good health, right? What happened is that he didn't appear for 1, 2, 3, 4, for about 10 days. So everyone thought the king was dead, you know. There's no king. So of course, you know, the next person in line was one of his sons. And it wasn't like European styled monarchies where, you know, it was of, I think the word is called primogeniture, where the firstborn son,
He gets to be. Yeah.
in the Mughal Empire, also the Ottoman Empire, and other Turkic dynasties, it was a battle between the brothers. It was a survival of the fittest. Fratricide, right? And that's another thing. The fratricide thing. So everyone knew, when the king has died or there's a new emperor that needs to come to the throne. Everyone knew, the king, the princes will fight each other. So Dara Shikoh, who was Aurangzeb's older brother, he was like, Aurangzeb can't know of this. So he tried to block all types of communications to the south, because Aurangzeb was in the south, in the Deccan, Hyderabad, modern day Hyderabad, the region, while he was in the north. So he tried to stop the flow of information, but of course, he wasn't able to stop it, and Aurangzeb knew of this. And so the battle of the Wolf Succession occurs from 1657 to 1659, and Aurangzeb, he defeats his brother Dara Shikoh, eliminates him. He eliminates his other brother Murad through very dubious means, in the sense that he said, let's ally, and then afterwards he backstabbed him. But you have to see, the thing is that at the end of the day, you can't have two kings ruling the same nation, right? This is their perception back then. You can't have two people that have royal lineage, so you have to eliminate all your opponents. The same thing he done. He imprisoned his father. Why? Because if his father wasn't in prison and he just let him be, he could rebel. He could revolt.
And Shah Jahan, this is from the Taj Mahal, right?
Yeah. So and Mumtaz Mahal is Aurangzeb's mother.
Okay.
Very. And people go to Taj Mahal every year. People from all over the world go to that. And a lot of the architecture in India, who built it? The Muslims. SubhanAllah. And this current government is trying to. I saw
a chart of it's out of the top 10 most visited places in India, I think 8 or 7 of them were from Mughal or Muslim times, or Delhi Sultanate or something. So
SubhanAllah.
It goes to show.
SubhanAllah. Yeah. So back to Aurangzeb. He also gets criticism for his destruction of temples. But this, I could go through all of them, but it would be too long, and it would get lost in the source, right? The destruction of temples, which was between about 1215 to 24. And this is the historians that say, the unbiased historians. Richard Eaton says about 15. Audrey Trush says about 24. So this is the number that we're playing with. And all the time that they were destroyed, it was either because they were helping a fugitive, for example, what's his name? Not Sambhaji, Shivaji. They make films about Shivaji, Sambhaji in Bollywood nowadays. Shivaji, was fighting against the Mughal state a lot. He went from south of India, from the Marathi kind of areas, which is Bombay and below, all the way to Gujarat, which is a long journey. A long journey, especially back then. You didn't have a car to go. You'd go on your horse,
hop on a plane,
So he raided Surat, which was the city of northern India, after Delhi, Agra, and all of these places. Fatehpur, sorry. Twice. He was causing devastation in the south. So of course he took him in as a prisoner, and then Shivaji fled the court, and some people helped him, certain populations helped him. So what did they do? They destroyed the temples as retaliation. Because when you back then, when you destroyed the temple, it was like you destroyed their kind of resistance to your rule. The same way there was some rebellions, the Rajput rebellions, he destroyed these temples in these specific places. Why? Because, you destroyed the temple, you destroyed that kind of association with the rebellion, right? And this wasn't a thing just exclusive to the Muslims. Hindu kings, as early as the 7th century within India, would destroy an opponent king's temple, because you defeat the king, you defeat him, and you destroy the temple. There's no means of resistance anymore. So he gets that kind of stick. But if you actually look in depth, as we have just touched upon, you see why these things happened. Or for example, if you look at Aurangzeb's executions, right? Sambhaji, the son of Shivaji, Sambhaji continued devastating the Mughals and going against them at war. So of course, when he finally caught him, he would eliminate him. And it wasn't like, back in the day, there was like the rise of liberalism. There wasn't no human rights associations. You had to be a strong king. If you're weak, oh no, I feel sorry for him, I'll let him go. What's he going to do? He's going to keep on rebelling. What's going to happen with the people around you, your nobility? Oh, he's a weak king. Let me rebel. Let me get some people against him. So that was the situation of the time. And the ninth guru, I can't remember the guru, but he eliminated one of the gurus. The reason why he eliminated that guru is because he was also taking up arms against the state. And I haven't taken this from Muslim historians. I took it from Audrey Trusk, from Richard Eaton, from these historians that are non-Muslim, unbiased, trying to actually find the truth instead of trying to propagate a narrative.
No, and just to talk on Aurangzeb, I think we could, like, obviously we look in history, there's the complete romanticization, then there's the complete vilification, and we find that truth is always sometimes in the middle. There's good and bad in those situations. Quickly, and I wanted to touch upon coexistence. Was there any coexistence during the time of Aurangzeb?
So during the time of Aurangzeb, there was coexistence. No matter what you might have heard online, what anti-Muslim propagandists have perpetuated, the narrative in reality is that there was coexistence. If there wasn't coexistence, there wouldn't be, yes, there was some rebellions within the Mughal state, but if there wasn't, you'd have way more rebellions. Furthermore, more than 30% of Aurangzeb's nobility were Hindu. Marathas, Rajputs, and everything in between. Furthermore, he deeply loved his Hindu advisor. His financial minister. He only had him for a few years, and then afterwards he would write letters saying like, "Oh, he was the best financial minister, best financial advisor. I wish I had competent men like him in my government, rather than these others that were of less competent." And furthermore, there is because Aurangzeb, he created the biggest compendium of Hanafi fiqh called the Fatwa-e Alamgiri, or the Fatwa-e Hindiya, which was this compilation of Hanafi fiqh. So everything from war to how to rule, marriage, divorce, everything included in this compilation of Islamic jurisprudence. This became now the law, but not the law for everyone, for the Muslims. Because the Hindus, what did they have? They had the Panchat system, which was an assembly of the elders coming together and deciding on what punishment they should give, or how they should come up with
rules and lawmaking,
regulation.
Their jurisprudence, in a sense,
Their jurisprudence, Jazakallah khair. So the Hindus had that, right? Panchat assemblies, but they preferred the Sharia courts.
Really?
Yeah, and this is in the book India and the Persianate Age by Richard Eaton. I think it's page 337. I still remember, subhanAllah.
Page 337. 337.
335, but it's somewhere in there.
Okay.
Yeah. And Hindu women went to the Sharia courts, Hindu merchants, artisans, you name it. They went to the Sharia courts. Why? Because, they saw better treatment than their own Panchat assemblies. So it shows you that, this kind of idea that Aurangzeb fostered, a lack of tolerance, that there was persecution, that there was no coexistence, this is false, right? And going back to that, you also have this example in the Ottoman Empire. Remember what we talked about before? about coexistence in the Ottoman Empire. So there's this another historian called Donald Quartet, and he talks about how Christians within the Ottoman Empire, they would go to the Sharia courts, to the Islamic courts, over their own ecclesiastical courts. And the reason for this is that they found that there was better treatment or better laws. For example, better laws for inheritance for their daughters. If they went to the Islamic courts, their daughters wouldn't be forced into an arranged marriage, and other reasons, right? Or, for example, in Jerusalem, after the Ottomans entered Jerusalem in 1517, there was about 1,000 court cases between 1531 to 1600 within the Ottoman, under the Ottoman domain. There was 1,000 court cases brought by Jewish people to the Sharia courts in Jerusalem alone. Wow. Yeah, and this was similar reasons to what Donald Quartet said, and he was saying how the Amnon Cohen is the historian who said this in his book A World Within. It's about 30 years old, nearly 1994. That's 30 years, right? Yeah. It's 30. He says that they also went to the courts because they saw it better inheritance laws and other laws that they saw that was better than their own Beth Dins. And, it truly shows you that, the Muslims, the Muslim court system wasn't there to just oppress people and force people. When people say, the Sharia is there to oppress and convert and whatnot.
Sharia law,
but in reality, when Sharia law was brought about within the Ottoman Empire, within Andalus, within the Mughal Empire, it was only for the Muslims. For the non-Muslims, they had their own courts. They had their own ways of ruling. And of course, you had to pay your taxes to the ruler. But apart from that, you had self-autonomy. And you also had that in Andalus, which we can get into in due course, inshallah.
Yeah, would love to. But just to quickly, before we get back, I want to talk about Italian Islam and Muslims in Italy as we wrap up our episode. But quickly, I wanted to touch upon a figure that's very famous, Tipu Sultan. Mm-hmm. People always talk about him in terms of this resistance fighter. There's someone who at the end of what seemed to be the Muslim rule in the subcontinent, he was someone who's rose as someone that people look up to a lot today. So quickly, tell us about Tipu Sultan.
Okay, Tipu Sultan was a freedom fighter against British colonialism in the late 17th century. So the story of Tipu Sultan actually starts with the death of Aurangzeb. So when Aurangzeb died, the Mughal Empire started to fracture very, very rapidly. From 1707, when Aurangzeb died, up until 1730s, the Mughal Empire fractured. There was different fragmenting. And yes, they hobbled on up until 1857. For most of that time, it was like a puppet state, right? Puppet government to first the Marathas, then the British, and then the British then finally eradicated them. And sent them to Burma. So the Mughal Empire fractures. So different states start to gain power or start to gain in
prominence,
the ascendancy. So you have the Marathas, you have Hyderabad, you have Bengal, you have Awadh, but you have Mysore. And Mysore was ruled first by a Hindu family or dynasty called the Wodeyars. Then this changed through some methods by Hyder Ali, Tipu Sultan's father. And then Hyder Ali, he ruled for about a few decades. And then his son, Tipu Sultan, came into power. But during the time that Hyder Ali was the ruler and Tipu Sultan was a prince, he already inflicted two major defeats against the British. The Battle of Polilor and the Battle of Anagodi. And both of these defeats were very humiliating to the British, especially the Battle of Polilor, which is seen as the most humiliating British defeat, the most
devastating.
Most devastating defeat for the British on Indian soil up until that point. Afterwards, there was other battles that were deemed more humiliating, but up until that time, it was the Battle of Polilor. And, you know, he defeated the British. He also defeated the Marathas. You know, everyone was against him, right? Hyderabad, Marathas, different petty rajas around Mysore, the British themselves. But yet he was defeating them. It truly shows you that he was someone that, you know, tried to defend his land, not what these people say, that he was someone that was trying to force Islam, trying to, you know, he hated his country and his people, because most of his subjects were not Muslim. They were not Muslim. They were either Christian or Hindu. So these myths also were propagated during the British colonial period. But at the end of the day, you can propagate so many myths, but the truth will always come about. Maybe not at the time, but later down the line. That we have now books that talk about how Tipu Sultan was not what these writers were saying. But back to why he was so amazing and why he was such a legend. He created weapons, rockets, right? That were like the most advanced type of weaponry at that time, right? Mm-hmm. You know, the French were the most, you know, if you take away Tipu Sultan, the French were the most advanced in weaponry. But Tipu Sultan usurped that title through his rockets. You know, nowadays we have, as we discussed about, countries have rockets, they name it with Aurangzeb,
Tipu Sultan,
Mahmud of Ghazni, these kind of things.
Yeah.
You know, he invented the rockets called Mysorean rockets. Furthermore, there was like in his realm, you know, there was irrigation, industrious buildings, there was large agricultural output, textile industry was booming. For example, the average income of Mysore, which was his state, was 5 times higher than the subsistence level within the rest of India.
Yeah. Oh, really?
So what's the subsistence level in London? Maybe 35K. Mm-hmm. Imagine someone is making that 5 times on average. Yeah. Just to put it into context. And his state, Mysore, overtook Bengal as the richest region in the subcontinent. So Bengal had 12% of the world's wealth. Well, 25 was in the subcontinent alone under Aurangzeb. 12% was in Bengal. Mysore overtook that under Tipu Sultan. And not just, you know, he, made good money for his state. He created these weapons. Yeah. He was very diligent in his deen. For example, he would pray 5 times a day. He would, he'd read the Quran. He would seek knowledge in the deen. He even sent an embassy to Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And he instructed everyone in that embassy. It was like about 9 people. He instructed all of them that you must pray your 5 salah. So I didn't care about who was the best dignitary, who was the best statesman, who was the best person to do the job. He just focused on the people that were diligent in their deen. And you have other statesmen, other rulers that ruled India that were Muslim, that, weren't about this lifestyle of being very diligent in their deen. That's why we talk about Tipu Sultan. That's why we don't talk about Shah Jahan a lot, Jahangir, Akbar, Babur, and all the Delhi Sultans, because there's a lot of Delhi Sultans. I don't know the exact number, but there's many. And regarding Tipu Sultan, he brought, and his city, Seringapatam, was very industrious in the sense that there was lots of people, there's about 100,000 people all living happily. And the reason I say this is because when Tipu Sultan died, his subjects, Hindus and Muslims alike, were crying. They were sobbing at his funeral because he had died, because he was such a great ruler. So yeah, that's one thing. And we could go into Tipu Sultan much more, but I've got a lecture on him at Masjid, so inshallah, link my YouTube and they can watch the full thing, inshallah.
We'll make sure that's done. And I wanted to just, before we end off the podcast, I wanted to ask you quickly to bring you back to Italy, to I guess where it starts in the sense of Sicily, forgotten chapter. What made Muslim Sicily so unique? And apparently, after the Muslims lost their power, the Norman Christian kings decided to keep Muslim administrators, architects, scientists, even after conquering the island. What does this teach us about this conversation of coexistence? Because we've talked about coexistence in slightly a bit in Al-Andalus, in the Ottoman Empire, in the Mughal India, and now back to Italy. What does this teach us about coexistence and how that can maybe apply today?
It shows that, regarding coexistence, we can't have this. When we look into Islamic history, we can get into this kind of echo chamber where it's like, some people could say it's us versus them, a kind of very bad mentality to have, right? Because, you look at what happened in Al-Andalus, the persecution of the Moors and then the Moriscos, or you see what happened in the late Ottoman Empire, what happened to the Circassians, what happened to the Bulgarian, Greek Muslims, what happened to the Muslims in India or whatever. Yeah, you could look at this and have some type of animosity, but it's just these individual rulers or dynasties that done something bad. But you look at Sicily, you look at Roger II, who is probably the apex of all of this, right? He spoke Arabic. He dressed in Muslim clothing. He used Arabic inscriptions within his coins. One thing he done is that he hired Al-Idrisi, who's a very prominent cartographer during in the Muslim world, and there was other Muslim dignitaries within his hierarchy, but the main one is Al-Idrisi. He, allowed Muslims to live in peace and coexistence. He was a very tolerant king, and there's big chunky books about him, and there's many people that praise him to the highest degree because of how he fostered this coexistence. But there was other Norman kings that done the same, right? And there's also kings in Spain that done the same. You have off the top of my head, I can't remember them, but there's when the Muslims, they lost the territory. Many Muslims stayed within the kingdom of Aragon or Castile, and it was basically the same thing of non-Muslims living under Muslim rule, where they would just pay the jizya, and they would have coexistence, self-autonomy. They could they could recite the adhan, all of that kind of stuff. So it truly shows you that history is not black and white. It's not West versus East. It's not us versus them. It's it's very complex, and it's very beautiful if you look at the coexistence that was fostered under Muslim rule in Spain, or Christian rule in Spain, or Muslim rule in Sicily, or Christian rule in Sicily. So, and there's many more examples where this coexistence was experienced by non-Muslim rulers for Muslim populations. But going back to Sicily, I just want to give a brief history for the people that don't know. The Muslims began the conquest of Sicily in 827 CE, and it took until
that early,
and it took until 902 CE to finish the conquest. Unlike Spain, Spain was very quick, about 6 to 7 years at max, and they reached they reached the Pyrenees Mountains. But the Arab conquest of Sicily was much slower. The reason for this was that there was infighting between the Muslims, the defenses of the Sicilians was quite strong, and a whole host of other reasons. And so the reason why the Muslims start the campaign of Sicily, they open it up, is because there's a rebel by the name of Euphemus. And he goes to the Muslims saying, take Sicily, because he had some disagreements with the Byzantines. And the Muslims were actually, they were debating, should we take Sicily or should we not take Sicily? There were some scholars that did, like some scholars that were students of the actual, of some of the imams, the big imams. They were like, no. Others were like, yes. And the major one was Asad ibn al-Furat. You know who he studied with?
Who?
Malik ibn al-Nas, rahmallah.
Wow.
And who he was a student of? Abu Hanifa, rahmallah. So he had big precedence, right? He had big...
accreditation.
He had a lot of, credit to his name, a lot of, power to his name. And he said, no, we should open it up, because Allah gave us this opportunity to bring Islam, to bring justice to the island. So the Muslims start the conquest, and in 902 CE, it's finally the last Byzantine stronghold falls. And for about 190 years, there's coexistence between the Jewish, Muslim, and Christian community. For example, the Christian community, some of them were Greek, they prospered even 100 years after the conquest had happened. Or Giovanna Summerfield, so basically there's this book called Muslim Sicily by Noha al-Sahar, and it's a bunch of essays, right? And Giovanna Summerfield says that the Muslim conquest of Sicily brought peace and prosperity to the Jewish community. Then David Abu Layfa, in the same book, he says that the non-Muslim had better rights than the Muslim within Sicily because they could trade with whoever they wanted. But the Muslims, they could only trade with Muslims. This is what the Emir stipulated in the island. So that's why more non-Muslims could gain wealth and accumulate it much faster than the Muslims themselves. And one thing about Sicily that was kind of special was, yes, Andalus had that, but there was a lot of poets in Sicily as well. And there's this book called Narrating Muslim Sicily by William Granara. And he talks about all these poets. Can't lie, the book is very boring, but if you're into poetry, you might like it. So that's that. And yeah, people from all over Europe would go to Sicily to what? Learn in these madrasas. There was mosques. There was 300 mosques in Palermo alone. And each imam in these mosques would have at least 80 students at the very minimum. And there would be non-Muslims from Europe, whether there was Germany, Italy, England, Spain, you name it. So, but the Muslim existence in Sicily is very short because by 1091, the Normans finally take the last Muslim holdings on the island. And then the Normans come, and then afterwards, the Muslims later on are persecuted. But this is by Frederick II. He deports them to Lucera or Apulia, the region. And again, the Muslims, even though they're deported and they're given high taxation, they still prosper because of their skills that they have. And then afterwards, there's other issues. Another group from the north, from Italy, sacks Apulia, sells them into slavery. Some escape, some get massacred. And yeah, that's the end of the Muslim kind of existence in Italy up until, recent post-war migration.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And it is, subhanAllah, I think it goes to show how much there is to explore. And I love how we went beyond the historical dramas and the quick snapshots and stuff. And I think we need more people. I think we were talking about this, that, you mentioned how you give talks, mashallah. And I'm sure many people that live in the London area would love to go to those talks. Is that you go to these audiences and you might see people who like history, but you don't see historians or as in people who want to study or become historians. So I'm hoping that can change. And I think hopefully this can be the start of that conversation. But before we go, our last and final question at the Youth Podcast is always, Pablo, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
Okay, so there's a lot of advice. It would be, read books. Read books on something you're interested in and that is beneficial. Whether that's history, it could be self-improvement. Of course, books of the deen have to be read. Whether that's physics, maths, you name it. Read books because books is where the treasure is, where the gold is. It's not in your, it's not on TikTok. It's not on Instagram. It's not on these social media apps. The gold is in these books. Why? You might read a book and it might not give you the answer you're looking for, but it could give you a type of start of what you're trying to,
Do you have any recommendations just off the top of your head? And
it depends what type of book you're but a book could give you a basic understanding of something and that could eventually give you a breakthrough. Do you get what I mean? Books are so versatile in that sense. They give you the answer or they could help you in finding that answer. Do some type of sport, right? Like do some type of sport. whether you want to do football, gym, Muay Thai, all of that kind of stuff. You know, stay, because I wasn't Muslim at 18, but stay firm on your deen, or if it was my actual non-Muslim self, look into Islam properly. So I'd say those three would be a very important advice. Read, because if you don't learn, you don't earn. The deen, very important. And, you know, keeping yourself like it's not even for your physical health, it's more for your mental health. You know, sports is very important. Not just physically, but mentally is very, like, you know, you could have a very difficult day, you know, things are happening, but you do that Muay Thai session, you do that football session, you do that gym session, everything kind of falls into place. And also have a bigger purpose than yourself. Of course, the first is, you know, worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and seeking his pleasure. But after that, you need a kind of dunya purpose, in the sense that, you know, you need to strive to something every single day. Because if you don't have that, you know, you could actually fall to the whims of the pleasures of the dunya, right? So for example, me is trying to become the best historian in the world. For other people, it could be, you know, being the best medic, being, you know, the top physician, whatever the case may be, or the top podcaster like yourself. So you need to have something that's bigger than you, a greater goal to look forward to, because that will keep you mentally in check. So that's my kind of advice.
Pablo, it's been a pleasure. Barakallah feek. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you.
Ameen.
It's been fascinating, and it's very refreshing and insightful to see someone take knowledge and this pursuit of it so seriously and properly, and also in a way that's interesting and that people can understand. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. And it's been a very big honor for us here at the Thinking Youth podcast.
Ameen. Can I give one piece of advice?
Please.
If you're thinking of going uni and you're thinking to pursue it, a degree, and you're interested in history, definitely consider it with a lot of emphasis. Why do I say this? Because as you said before, a lot of people like history. A lot of people are fascinated, you know, when they get older, because they hear it from, you know, interesting people like Yaqub Ahmed, Adnan Rashid, you know, these kind of big, you know, giants of Islamic history. They hear it and they're like, oh, you know, Islamic history is so exciting, it's so fascinating.
So cool, yeah.
But they don't take it, not many people take it as a bachelor's, as a master's. You know, no one tries to pursue it really. And I feel this comes from the fact that people don't see a monetary value in it. They see, oh, you know, just become a teacher and that's it. But, you know, it's not just being a teacher. You know, you can be an archivist, you can be a curator of prints, you could be an academic in a university, you could be someone that's there just to write books. So, you know, don't just think about, oh, I need to just make money and feed my belly. Think about, you know, you make an impact. Be that person that instead of doing medicine, but medicine's important. Instead of doing engineering, do history. Instead of doing maths, do history. You know, take it into consideration, because history is very, very important. Because now I could do a whole podcast in itself why history is important. But history, you know, there's many reasons why history is important. Going back to what we discussed first, learning history can give you inspiration. You know, as we talked about all the luminaries, it gives you inspiration. Learning history can give you that understanding of, Islamic history is not that barbaric, you know. Learning the reality can give you these answers to what many Islamophobes will say. It gives you the answers.
Yeah,
the Janissaries, jizya,
these key buzzwords and terms in movies, propaganda.
It also makes you more proud of your identity. If you look, you look at these luminaries, or it gives you a blueprint. Andalus, the Mughal Empire, the Ottoman Empire. These give you blueprints on how a society functions, on how to interact with different types of people. So, you know, Islamic history is very important, and we need academics. And why it's not being elitist, it's not being someone that's classist, right? You could read a book, but your interpretation of that book is just on your lack. You know, you can't interpret it as well as someone that is an academic, right? Because an academic can actually say, no, I don't believe in this, or I don't take this opinion. But when you have people that, you know, look into history, whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim, they start making up all their own theories because they read it somewhere. Do you get what I mean? So
Yeah.
you need that kind of grounding and
Academic rigor
that rigor
to deal with that. Yeah.
to deal with to deal with everything in history. So, you know, it's not just about reading books, it's about being trained as a historian. And that's what I hope, inshallah, many Muslims can do. Because, you know, as I said before, those two people I mentioned, Yaqub Ahmed and Adnan Rashid, they influenced me to take this path, you know. So inshallah, I can do the same with someone that's 17, 18, 19, you know, thinking to go uni, inshallah.
May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to reflect from history, learn from history, and to build a better future for this ummah and the world, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, make sure to check out Pablo's channel. We'll have it in the description. Very fascinating conversation. And I'm sure if you have any questions, you can contact him on his Instagram. And if you want to invite him out for an event or a talk, please. And I'm sure your community, your ISOC or your university will absolutely love it. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for tuning in. Please make sure to subscribe and comment. Let us know what we do good. Let us know what guests to bring. Let us know how we can improve, because me and you, all of us, we're all doing this together. You're part of the Thinking Youth family, and we really appreciate all the support that you have. Jazakumullahu khairan. And until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum. Now you've reached the end of this show, and the fact that you've stayed until the very end tells me that you truly believe in our work. Please consider making a one-off donation or becoming a member by visiting thinkingmuslim.com/membership. Now, your contributions give you exclusive behind-the-scenes access and the ability to ask questions to our guests, and monthly calls with myself, my team, and our guests like Sami Hamdi. Jazakallah khair, and keep us in your du'as.